All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into something that sounds like it's straight out of a spy thriller, but it's actually reshaping global finance as we speak.
We're talking digital currency, shadowy back channels, and a high-stakes game of economic chess, right?
Exactly. Can Russia actually sidestep Western sanctions using their new digital ruble? I mean, is that even possible?
Well, that's what we're here to find out. And we've got a mountain of intel to sift through, reports from the Carnegie Endowment, analysis from Ledger Insights, even a deep dive directly from the Bank of Russia from back in 2020.
Yeah, and that's what I find so fascinating. Looking back at what the Bank of Russia was saying in 2020, it's like they were preparing for this moment without even realizing it. Back then, it was all about keeping pace with the digitalization of finance. Sanctions weren't really the driving force yet.
Right. It was more like, hey, everyone else is doing the digital currency thing. We should too. But then, boom, 2022 hits, those sanctions come crashing down, and suddenly Russia's looking at their digital ruble project with a whole new sense of urgency.
It's like their rainy day fund suddenly became their lifeline. Because let's be real, those sanctions are hitting Russia hard. The Carnegie report doesn't sugarcoat it. Businesses are scrambling. Transaction costs are through the roof. It's chaos out there.
Yeah, they're definitely feeling the squeeze. And that's where the digital ruble enters the picture. But, and this is crucial, we're not talking about some Bitcoin-esque free-for-all here.
Right. This isn't about letting people mine digital rubles in their basement.
Exactly. This is about government-backed digital cash, a central bank digital currency, or CBDC for the acronym lovers out there. It's controlled, it's centralized, and it's got the potential to be a total game changer.
Okay, so walk me through this. How exactly is this different from, say, using Apple Pay or something?
Think of it this way. The Bank of Russia is proposing what they call a two-tier system. Imagine this. You still bank with your regular bank, use their app if you want, but the digital rubles themselves, those are liabilities of the central bank.
So it's like having a digital wallet with a direct line to the source, even if you're accessing it through your usual bank's interface.
Exactly. And that's where it gets interesting. No more relying on SWIFT, that system that basically connects banks worldwide, which Russia's been partially cut off from.
Right, because right now, if a Russian business wants to pay a supplier in, say, India, they've got to navigate this whole web of intermediaries, and each one takes a cut. It's slow, it's expensive.
And it's vulnerable, exactly. And that's the potential promise of the digital ruble, at least according to the Bank of Russia. Faster transactions, lower costs, and they're even dangling the possibility of offline payments. They're talking about financial inclusion for people without touch accounts, the whole 9 yards.
It almost sounds too good to be true. But this is where I start getting a little skeptical. Because we're talking about Russia, a country not exactly known for its, shall we say, hands-off approach, especially when it comes to finances.
That's the million-ruble question, isn't it? How much control are we willing to sacrifice for convenience? Because the Carnegie report raises some serious red flags about the digital ruble's potential impact on privacy. Remember those security requirements they issued back in December 2023?
Oh, you mean the ones where they basically said, hey, all your digital ruble transactions might get routed through the Bank of Russia with Federal Security Service keeping an eye on things. Yeah, that didn't exactly inspire confidence.
Yeah, Big Brother might be watching you spend your digital rubles isn't exactly a winning marketing slogan.
It feels like a classic trade-off, right?
Yeah.
On one hand, you've got the promise of faster payments, maybe even a way to sidestep some of those pesky sanctions. But on the other hand, you've got the potential for even more government surveillance and control.
And that's before we even get into whether this whole thing will even work. I mean, Russia's had some success with homegrown solutions like their Mir payment system after the 2014 sanctions. But to really understand the scale of what they're attempting with the digital ruble, we need to look at who they might be partnering with.
You mean China? They're already light years ahead in the digital currency game with their digital yuan. I mean, they were even using it at the Beijing Olympics, right?
Exactly. They see this as their chance to challenge the U.S. dollar's dominance, and they're not being shy about it.
So we're talking about a potential seismic shift in global finance. Two major players teaming up to create a system intentionally operating outside of Western control.
That's the concern keeping Western policymakers up at night. But to really understand how viable this scenario is, we need to dig a little deeper into how this digital ruble is actually designed to work.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What's the deal with this two-tier system? How would it affect everyday Russians?
All right, so imagine the digital ruble as like this exclusive club, right?
Okay, I'm intrigued. An exclusive club for digital rubles. Go on.
So the digital ruble itself, it lives on a system run by the Bank of Russia, super exclusive. But you, the average Ivan on the street, you wouldn't be partying directly with the central bank, right?
So no velvet ropes for me.
Not exactly. You'd still go through your regular bank. They're like the bouncers at the door granting you access to this digital wonderland.
Okay, so it's like how we use online payment platforms now. We link our bank accounts, but those platforms have their own systems running behind the scenes.
Bingo. You got it. And that's where things get really interesting because behind those velvet ropes, the central bank,
Right.
they're the ones calling the shots, meaning they're issuing the digital rubles, tracking where they go, and, well, let's just say they have the power to shut the whole party down if they want to.
Which, let's be honest, is a big part of why people are freaking out about this whole thing. Privacy experts are having a field day, and for good reason. Imagine the level of financial surveillance if every transaction gets routed through the Bank of Russia. Like, forget about buying a suspicious amount of fertilizer. They'll know if you splurge on an extra scoop of ice cream.
It's a valid concern, absolutely. And it gets to the heart of the debate around CBDCs in general. I mean, is this really about offering a better, faster, cheaper service? Or is it about governments grabbing more control over our financial lives? That's the question, isn't it?
Right, because this isn't just a Russia thing. We're seeing countries all over the world toying with this idea of digital currency.
Exactly. But let's not get sidetracked here. We're talking about Russia, and their big gamble hinges on one thing.
What's that?
Convincing other countries to actually use this digital ruble, that's their real challenge. I mean, it's a tough sell, right?
Because who wants to risk angering the West, especially with the whole secondary sanctions thing looming overhead?
Exactly. It's like trying to convince your friends to come to a party that everyone else is boycotting. It's awkward, especially when those other folks hold a lot of sway.
So even if this digital ruble works flawlessly, even if it's cheaper, faster, more convenient, there's still this massive trust issue.
You hit the nail on the head. And let's not forget, Russia's attempt to create their own SWIFT alternative, the SPFS, it hasn't exactly set the world on fire.
Not exactly a ringing endorsement. So where does that leave the digital ruble?
Well, that's the billion ruble question, isn't it? Do they try to go it alone, or do they double down on that China partnership? Because China, they've got the technology, they've got the ambition, and perhaps most importantly, they've got a real bone to pick with the U.S. dollar's dominance.
So let's play this out. Say this digital ruble, digital yuan dream team actually becomes a reality. What would that even look like?
Well, first off, they'd need to make sure those two systems can actually talk to each other. We're talking about interoperability, seamless transactions between the digital ruble and the digital yuan. Imagine, like, businesses in Russia paying their Chinese suppliers instantly. No more SWIFT, no more currency conversions, none of that.
A whole parallel financial system just humming along, completely outside the reach of the U.S. dollar. I can see why people are both excited and terrified at the same time.
It's a long shot, no doubt. But let's say, for argument's sake, that Russia actually pulls this off. They get enough countries to jump on board the digital ruble train despite the risks. There's still one more piece of this puzzle we haven't talked about.
Which is?
The everyday user experience. Because at the end of the day, none of this matters if people don't actually find the digital ruble useful.
Right. Well, it all comes down to whether it actually makes their lives easier.
Right.
Otherwise, why bother?
Exactly. And this is where some of those potential benefits we talked about earlier come into play. Remember how the Bank of Russia mentioned offline payments?
Yeah, it sounded pretty futuristic. Paying for stuff even without internet access. Like, how does that even work?
Well, think about it. You could potentially transfer digital rubles to your phone, use it in areas with spotty internet, maybe even during emergencies when those traditional systems are down.
So it's like digital cash, but the central bank can track.
There's the rub, right. It's this fascinating concept. Could be huge for financial inclusion, especially in those developing countries.
But it also opens the door to a whole new level of control and surveillance. Even more so than with those traditional online payments. It's like this double-edged sword.
Exactly. Convenience versus control. Innovation versus risk. And that tension, that right there, is the fundamental dilemma at the heart of this entire digital ruble saga.
All right, so we've talked about the potential upsides, the digital ruble's supposed superpowers, but let's get real for a second.
Because it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right?
Not even close. We're talking about a major technological shift, one that comes with a whole host of challenges, especially for a country like Russia.
And some of the biggest hurdles they face, you know what? They're not even technological, really.
Oh, you mean like the whole trust issue?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Carnegie report They really hammer this point home. This deep skepticism surrounding the digital ruble, especially when it comes to privacy, that's a major obstacle for Russia to overcome.
Yeah, and it's not just paranoia,
Right.
right? We talked about those security requirements from December 2023, the possibility of transactions being routed through the Bank of Russia with the Federal Security Service looking over everyone's shoulder. I mean, that's not exactly reassuring.
It does make you wonder who's really benefiting from this convenience, right?
Right, and it's not just about surveillance either. Some critics are worried that this digital ruble could give the Russian government way too much control over people's money.
Oh, yeah, that's the other shoe dropping. Imagine being able to freeze the accounts of your political opponents or, restrict access to funds based on, I don't know, social media posts you make. That's a scary thought.
It's like Black Mirror meets your bank account.
Exactly. And the thing is, even if the technology works flawlessly, if people don't trust the system, if they don't trust the people in charge, are they really going to use it?
Good point. It's like that saying you can lead a horse to water.
But you can't make it use a digital ruble it doesn't trust. Something like that.
Exactly. And it's not just everyday Russians who are wary. You've got international partners who are watching this rollout with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Oh, absolutely. They want to be convinced that this whole digital ruble thing is about making the economy more efficient, not about dodging sanctions or, projecting Russian influence on a global scale.
Which brings us back to China. Because if any country is both willing and able to partner with Russia on this, it's them. But even then, we're talking about two governments that aren't exactly known for their transparency.
Yeah. It's a gamble, no doubt about it. China's got their own digital yuan, which they're actively trying to position as a global alternative to the US dollar. Teaming up with Russia on the digital ruble, that could either be a huge win or a spectacular backfire for both of them.
So where does this leave us? Is the digital ruble a stroke of genius, a desperate gamble, or somewhere in between?
Honestly, it's way too early to call it. Even the experts are divided, and this whole situation is changing by the day. But here's what we do know. The digital ruble is like this fascinating case study.
A case study in what?
In how technology is reshaping global finance right before our eyes. It's this high-stakes experiment with enormous implications, and whether it succeeds or fails, it's a story worth paying attention to.
Because it highlights just how important it is to be informed, to be critical thinkers, especially when it comes to these new technologies, because they have the potential to impact all of our lives.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, this isn't just about Russia or China or even digital currencies. It's about the future of money itself. Who gets to control it, how we use it, what it means for our freedom.
Why?
These are questions we all need to be asking.
Because the future of finance isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we create together through the choices we make and the conversations we have. And on that note, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the digital ruble? What questions are still swirling around in your head? Head over to our website or find us on social media, and let's keep this conversation going. Because the more informed we all are, the better equipped we'll be to navigate the complexities of this brave new digital world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Knowledge is power, folks. Now let's go put ours to good use.